Let's run a little scenario for a second. Imagine that you have a house in Australia with a mortgage, and let's say the house is worth, let's say $200,000 more than the mortgage. That means you've got $200,000 worth of equity. You're worth $200,000, and that's a pretty common arrangement in a place like Australia. $200,000 of equity in Australia is not much. In fact, around a lot of the world, in the Western world, $200,000 of equity is actually almost nothing. It's meaningless, especially because with that $200,000 equity, you can't really do anything. You need a place to live. You've got to keep that house to survive. But in a place like Indonesia, it means something completely different. Actually, in Indonesia, it means you're a billionaire. In fact, you only need about $80,000 in Australian money to become a billionaire over here in Indonesia, because the currency at the moment is so strong in Australia's favour and actually very strong in favour of many Western countries. The rupee is just a little bit sort of subdued at the moment. For example, in Australia, $1 Australian equals about 12,000 rupiah. The thing about being a billionaire here in Indonesia is it's not just a play on words, it's also about a mindset. When you come here, you've got all these zeros after your bank balance, it actually makes you feel a little bit more wealthy. And deploying that money carefully can really lead to a really good life. And I'll go through today exactly what that means in reality. If you're thinking, maybe I want to leave Australia or your home in the US or the UK or Europe somewhere else and live in Indonesia, what it actually means if you've got more than $1 billion rupiah. So I live on the island of Bali in Indonesia, and I've lived in other places in Indonesia as well. Bali at the moment, because I prefer Bali right now, but I have lived in Java as well. And one of the key things about Bali is that there are actually two distinct economies. It's a bit different in other parts of Indonesia, but in Bali, definitely two economies. One is the tourist economy, and one is the local economy. And it's really important to know where those economies are and what the price differences are, and also how are you going to fit into each of those economies if you decide to move here? Because if you get into the tourist economy and you're just doing tourist things all the time and you actually live here, your expenses are going to be quite high, and it sort of defeats some of the purpose of living in a place like Bali. I mean, it's not all about being cheap here in Bali, but it's part of it. It's definitely part of the appeal. And if you live in that tourist economy too much, you'll be paying too much for most of the things that you do on a daily basis. If you go and have a typical breakfast here in a place like Sanur in Bali, you'll be looking at paying maybe anywhere up to 70 or 80,000 rupiah, maybe a bit more if you have a coffee with it, for your breakfast, yeah? This morning, I'm actually walking to one of my favorite places for a local breakfast, and I'll show you what it's like. I love that food, and it's enough for me. It's nutritious enough for me. It's safe enough for me, but it's really cheap as well. And this is sort of in the local economy. There's actually a little coconut shop here that I really like to go to from time to time. I might just see if I can get a drink down here as well. A little coconut water. Air kelapa, satu. Okay, so air kelapa is coconut water. Yang kecil ya, kecil. Yeah. And air kelapa botol kecil is 15,000 rupiah, so a real bargain. Kasih ya. There you go. So this is a little place that is not that far from my house that I like to go and get coconut products from. You can see here they've got jellies with coconut in and all sorts of different drinks and that sort of thing. So there you go, got my coconut water, 500 mils of it, pretty cheap. And it's the real deal. It's not like one of those sort of store-bought ones. They get deliveries of coconut most days from Java. Big truck comes along and they actually process them themselves there with a little machine and scoop out all the coconut flesh and a bit of coconut water. And that is just gold, so refreshing. Now, like if you go to a cafe and buy like a glass of coconut water, it might cost you, I don't know, 45,000 or something like that. So it might be triple the price than getting it from the supplier direct. That's the sort of thing I'm talking about between the tourist prices or the tourist economy and the local economy. There's actually a bit of an invisible wall there as well. You might not notice it so much when you come here on holidays. And it's built that way so that really you get stuck into that tourist economy. And that's okay when you're on a holiday. You can have a great time and the prices are a lot cheaper than they are back in your home country for sure, but it's still not the local economy. And the local economy is just behind the tourist economy. Like it's just out of view, a little bit hidden, a hidden wall there. And trying to get into that hidden economy, that local economy, can sometimes take a little bit of doing. So for me, it's because I can speak the local language that I can get into that economy. Other people that can't speak the language do have success as well, It might be a little bit harder getting recommendations and so forth, but if you live here long enough, you'll definitely be in that local economy a lot. Otherwise, it becomes too expensive to do all the tourist stuff all the time. Even with housing and so forth, there are sort of two economies available. So a great example of the sort of food you can get, this is satay, the local style satay, with ikan laut. Yeah, that means fish from the ocean. So they'll mince up the fish and put it on little sticks there. It's a bit spicy, and they've got a bit of chicken there, minced chicken as well. And then you've got pepes, pepes ikan. So pepes is steamed fish. Look at that, all this food. Now, that might sound weird to you initially, but once you understand what you're eating, this is actually becomes part of your staple. It's really delicious. For example, at that place there where they're selling the satay, that satay is tuna, and you can get 10 sticks for 30,000. So that's what I'm talking about. You've got to try and dip your toes into that local economy. You don't have to be in it all the time, like that's the thing. I mean, I dip my toes into both. So sometimes I like a pizza, which is obviously the tourist economy or the expensive economy, and then I'll like a satay, like I like both things. And that's how you sort of balance your Western needs with some of the cost things that you're trying to get under control when you move to a place like this. One of the things that I sometimes hear in Bali, not from a lot of people, but from some people, especially expats, they'll say things like, oh, Bali's really expensive now. It never used to be this expensive. And one of the problems is if you are sticking to the tourist zone, it can feel quite expensive and your dollar doesn't go as far as it used to and that sort of thing. And I think one of the problems is some people are not really going to the local places enough, that local economy enough, to really feel the cost benefits. As soon as you do that, like maybe for 1 or 2 meals a day, you start saving a heap of money. And that invisible wall that I was talking about between the two economies, busting through that wall is one of the first tasks that you'll have if you move here. And that's trying to get recommendations from people, exploring the place on your own and finding what you like, what you don't like, what prices are good, what aren't good. You know, that sort of exploration, getting tips from people, perhaps learning the local language really goes a long way to getting into that local economy and really living a little bit more cheaply. I know this little place is like a nasi campur place, and I like to come here and get just something, a little, a bit of noodle or a bit of chicken or an egg or whatever, and a bit of, different bits and pieces, and I can get this pretty cheaply. I'll see what I can cook up for you here. Satu porsi 5,000. So this is a local place, not very busy at the moment. I can get a small little brekkie here for 5,000. So I don't eat a lot at breakfast. I don't have big meals. Sometimes I'll have oats or something like that, something really sort of bland and cheap. If I'm out and about, I'll have a little sort of nasi campur, which is what this food is. And I know I can get a portion here for 5,000 still. It's quite small, but it's really enough for me. You get a little tiny bit of chicken in there, because meat's expensive in Indonesia. And you'll get a few bits and pieces. I'll show you what it looks like. Okay, so I'll show you what I got. A big portion of rice. That there is what they call a perkedel, which is like it's a fritter of some sort, probably with jagung or corn in it. That one there is ayam suwir. Ayam suwir, that is like a shredded chicken, usually mixed with a bit of chili as well. You have to get used to the spice levels here as well. And then we've got a bit of noodle there. And in that noodle is a couple of little bits of veggie. It's very simple food. And you probably don't want to eat that for every meal, of course. You need a bit of variety, get a bit of veg into you, get a bit of fruit. But this is what I'm talking about, is that this could be your breakfast, and then maybe at sort of 10, 11 o'clock, you're going to get a mango from the local seller, which costs next to nothing as well. Or you're going to get a coconut water or a coconut jelly, or you're going to get a dragon fruit, or whatever fruit's in season. I mean, that's the other thing as well. You don't do the tourist thing where you just go, oh, I want dragon fruit every day, but dragon fruits aren't in season. You go and find what seasonal fruit is, and the prices will fluctuate based on what's in season. I mean, it's just a more normal way to live, really, than just going, okay, every day mango, mango, mango. Well, mango season's only for about 3 months a year anyway, but you can get them all year round, because somewhere in Indonesia there definitely will be a mango season, but there just might not be that many of them, so they're a little bit more expensive. Now, I know this ayam suwir is quite spicy, but I do like it. Like, it's just flavoursome. Now, I know some people these days are on a big health kick. If you're on a big health kick, you've got to be really careful about what sort of health kick you're on. If you're on a Western style health kick, where you're into protein powders and all that sort of stuff, obviously it's going to be a bit more expensive. If you're on a local style health kick, well, you can do that too. Like, you wouldn't be eating this if you're on a local style health kick. You'll be doing fruit and veg and probably cooking it yourself. You can get healthy local food at Warungs as well. You just need to know where to go. Like I know a place not far from here that does like nasi campur style, where you actually pick from the window what you want, and you could just pick, you know, the stir-fried veggies or the stir-fried tempeh or something like that, and maybe not have the rice. You could do that too, and it'd be very cheap. I'm just not that sort of picky, and I'm not really on a health kick, but if you are, of course you can do it a little bit better than I am. I'll go through in a little bit more detail now on what sort of costs you can expect between the different economies when you come and move to Bali. And it also depends greatly on the area that you live in Bali as well. Like if you live in a really tourist heavy area, you pay a lot more, even though it may not be a tourist price. Because there are a lot of tourists there, it just jacks up the prices. So here is an example of where I live here in Sanur. There are villas going for rent here for, let's say, around $1,000 Australian a week, around that price, heaps of them. They are very nice and you will want to live in them. You know, your heart goes, I've got to have that villa. But those prices are really expensive. On a world scale, that's pretty expensive. You know, I wouldn't pay that much even in Australia to rent a place. So that means that you've got to look for something a bit cheaper. And there is a whole range of places that go from very expensive down to very cheap. And in between is somewhere that you'll land on that sort of suits your budget. And that's the key. Finding a place that really suits your style plus your budget. You know, it takes a bit of work and a bit of effort. You can't just say, oh, everything's too expensive. That's not the correct way to look at it. It just means you haven't found what you want at the right price yet. So for example, there are places to rent here in Sanur for $3 million per month. And they are totally respectable. They have air conditioning and hot water. And it's like what they call a boarding house. Yeah, almost like a small hotel room. Very basic, but certainly enough for most people. At least for a few months while you sort of find your feet. And then after you sort of go around a little bit more, you might sort of upgrade. But if you've got a very tight budget, something like that might be suitable. For like about $6.5 million a month, you get something quite modern and quite nice. A little bit bigger, a little bit more facilities. So that's what you're sort of looking at. You're looking at going, okay, I'm going to go up a little bit more. These are local places, not tourist places. Now, after about $6.5 million, you're getting out of the local range. I mean, that's sort of like the upper range of what most locals will spend. Of course, some locals have a lot more money than that and will spend more than that. But, you know, I have a local friend, for example, who's paying $6.5 million a month in a sort of well, it's not a boarding house. At that level, it's sort of like an apartment complex. Very, very nice, massive, big swimming pool. Just a really well-run place. Now, if you move up from there, you might start paying on an annual basis, or for me, I'm paying on a 2-yearly basis. And mine is about 125 million per year. Now, I think that's about middle of the road in terms of what people would expect. So you get quite a decent place for that price, but you wouldn't want to have a big family in there. It's not really big enough to have, you know, 2 parents and 2 kids. But for a retired couple, for example, it's just absolutely perfect. I've got a little swimming pool in there, and I've actually done a video on it in the past if you want to go and check that out. Just really nice for that price. Now, finding places of that quality are sometimes a bit difficult. Oh, here we go. Look at this. Authentic gorengan Sumedang. This is from West Java, the province of West Java, and look at some of these fried foods. Now, if you're into health, you're not going to get that. Yeah, look at that. I might actually get some of that. Bu, kalau mau 2 biji saja, boleh? Yeah, makasih Bu. Yeah, look at that. They are fresh out of the fryer as well. They're going to be hot and crispy. Can't wait. 3,000 rupiah. What a bargain. Okay, let's try this bala bala. I think they call it ote ote in Balinese language. Crispy as. So good. It's basically fried batter and grated veggies. That's all it is. Like, it's totally unhealthy. And it's one of life's great sins is to stuff yourself with gorengan. Once you get a taste of it, you can't actually go back. It's just so good. What's going on here? Hello, how you going?
You're a fan.
Oh yeah? Oh, we got someone. Gorengan, yeah, this is Bala Bala. Hello. What's your name?
Aurel.
How you doing?
Good.
That's good.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. All right, this next one's called, it's not tahu goreng, which is what I thought it was. It's tahu isi. So what it is tofu with veggies stuffed inside, and then they deep fry it with a batter on it. And the actual tofu is from the place called Sumedang in West Java, sorry. And the tofu from Sumedang is known throughout Indonesia as being some of the best And I think it's because of the, well, they say it's the purity of the water. You know, that's what they say. Beautiful. Oh, that's hot, straight out of the fryer. I've just got caught out in the rain, so if it gets too bad, we're gonna have to stop this and start it again tomorrow. But we've already talked about the rental situation here and how the variability in price can really determine how well you live here. But it's also the same with food. Food has a really sort of two-track thing going on, and I've showed a bit of that today already where I've had my brekkie for 5,000, but it happens with all eating out. You can eat out here very, very cheaply, even at Western style places, but you can go high class as well, and it depends on what sort of meals you want, how much money you've got, what sort of money you're willing to spend. So an example of that would be if you go out for breakfast for 2 people and have, you know, I don't know, avocado on toast and a couple of coffees, it's probably going to cost you somewhere around like 150,000 rupiah. That's what sort of price you're going to be looking at. Whereas if you go and have the meal that I've had, well, it's next to nothing. Again, you can go a lot more expensive than that, and it depends on where you live in Bali as well, because there are more expensive places in Bali and cheaper places in Bali. So if you're in the village, of course you're not going to spend that much, but if you sort of like your more Western style comforts and you're in the south part of Bali, you'll pay more. Going on from that, we can talk about transport, and transport's a really interesting one because the debate really is whether you're going to ride your own motorbike, whether you're going to buy your own car, you know, or whether you're going to get around on public transport, or even just on the back of a motorbike with one of those motorbike taxis. So I'll go through each of those and explain a little bit about how each of those works in terms of price. So I guess the cheapest option is to catch a bus around the place. So the buses are not too comprehensive, but they do go through places like Sanur. And you can get a bus for 4,400 all the way from somewhere like Kuta all the way to Ubud. 4,400, so cheap. A motorbike taxi going around somewhere like Sanur is going to cost you about 7,000 for one trip on the back of a motorbike. If you catch a car taxi, oh, look at that. Look at the smoke coming off that. Beautiful. Oh, I got all the smoke. If you go through, if you get a taxi, it might cost you 20,000 to get around the place, or 15,000. And then if you buy your own motorbike, more expensive again, but you've got complete freedom. Some people aren't comfortable being on a motorbike, so they might want to drive a car. And you know, if you want to drive your own car here, you start getting into costs which are similar to those in the West. Slightly cheaper because the price of cars here is slightly cheaper, but we're not talking big dollars cheaper, you know. So that's where you can really add up your costs if you're owning your own car. Now, some people who have got families, they're sort of for them it's a necessity, so they'll buy their own car and get around in that. That's just something that they wouldn't live without. But for me, I get around on my own motorbike. I catch motorcycle taxis when I need to, and that's how I do it. A brand new motorbike, 160cc, costs about 40 million rupiah, and then and fuel's dirt cheap on a motorbike, so you wouldn't even have to calculate that. The other thing that people, hello, how are you? The other thing that people like to do here, people are friendly by the way. The other thing that people like to do here is have a little bit of enjoyment, like a massage, for example. To go and get a massage is a nice thing, and getting a massage is quite cheap. Here, you can get a massage, depending on where you go, of course, but yeah, you can estimate about 150,000 for an hour massage. You can get cheaper, of course, more expensive ones as well, depending on where you go. Well, that's pretty good value for something that's just a nice thing to have, isn't it? In a previous video, I did a rough estimate of how much I spend per year for 2 people living here, and I live a really good life. I think a high quality of life. I spend about 390 million rupiah per year for 2 people. And I don't want for anything, I don't need anything. That's just everything I spend for a good life here, including a really nice house that I live in. Now, I could easily live a lot cheaper than that. I choose not to because that's sort of the level that I want to live at, you know. Other people have different needs and different wants, and they'll live at different levels. I know some people live a lot more luxurious than that, and I know other people who live a lot more cheaply than that, which sort of brings me to the point of, let's say you have a pension only in Australia, yeah? So I'll use those figures as they're the ones I know. A single person in Australia gets about $1,100, a bit more than $1,100 per fortnight. So let's just say, in rough terms, 2,200 Australian dollars per month from the government as a pension when you're 67. And that pension can be taken overseas with a few deductions. But let's just, for the argument's sake, say you're getting 2,200 a month and you choose to come and live in Bali. 2,200 a month equals about 25, 26 million rupiah, maybe more, I think. I'll put the little conversion on the screen there. That sort of salary is like more than a bank manager's salary here. It's more than a lot of people earn here. The minimum salary here is actually about 3.5 million a month. Some people get more than that, but that's what you're dealing with. And a lot of people here don't even earn the minimum salary if they're in the informal sector. So you've got to understand that if you're earning 25 million plus per month, you're living at a level which is more than 5 times, maybe 6 times the level of a minimum wage worker here. And they can live here, even though it's a little bit tough. So there's a lot of playroom there. So you've got to understand that with an Australian pension, it's plenty to live on here. Now, if you've got more money, of course, you live a better life. But it just depends on how much money you want to spend, really, doesn't it? I actually meet people here on a daily basis who are doing a mixture of own savings and superannuation and pension, every day here in Bali, who are doing their own thing. Everyone has their own little way of making it work for them, and the little budgets that work for them, and the price of the property and the sort of lifestyle they want. People do it differently, and you'll get some people criticising another person for spending too much, and then another person saying, I don't know how you live on so little. And but that's everyone's personal journey. Everyone can do it for a different price at a different quality level based on what their personal circumstances are. And you've got to sort of find that out for yourself. What this all boils down to is that there's a thing called currency arbitrage, where a poor person in one country can actually feel like a rich person in another country. That happens quite often when someone might have not a lot of money in one country, like you might just be on the pension in Australia and you feel poor, and then you go and move to Bali and that same money goes a lot further. It's sort of what people are doing these days, especially because airfares are so low these days. If you need to go back and forth, you can do that pretty easily. That currency arbitrage is a really big thing these days, and you can only really do it in countries that want you there. Now, you don't want to be rolling up to a country where they don't want you there. But a place like Indonesia has very, very good visa regulations for retirees especially. And what that means is that the government of Indonesia wants people to come to their country and spend all their money and not take a job off a local. So the main part of that is, don't come here to work. Like, you don't want to be doing that. You want to be here and spend your money here. So it injects all this money into the local economy, but doesn't really take anything from the people. That's the general theory behind it, and that's what the Indonesian government set up. And they've been very forthright about that. Of course, there are a lot of other countries that have done the same thing as well, because they know that around the world there's all these retirees looking to spend their money somewhere, and they want that money spent in their country. Indonesia's one of those. So if you do come here, don't sort of come here with getting a job in mind. Yeah, you could, but it's a less likely proposition. Think about spending your money here. So becoming a billionaire here in Indonesia is not that difficult to do. All you need is to have a little bit of equity from a house, or perhaps a little bit of money saved up in your superannuation, or perhaps you just saved up a bit of cash in the bank as well. 80,000 Australian dollars gets you there. You'll be a billionaire too, and you'll live a pretty good lifestyle here in Indonesia. Just make sure you do it respectfully, follow the laws, be a good person, be polite and respect local people, and you'll get along fine. Hey, thanks for coming along with me today on this rainy day here in Sanur, Bali. Really enjoyed bringing you a little bit more about how I did it, why I left Australia and became a billionaire here in Indonesia. I love it here. Wouldn't trade my life for anything. Thanks for watching. Make sure you hit that subscribe button to keep up to date with all things Sanur and the rest of Indonesia. I'll catch you next time, and sampai jumpa.